but we say, those bits are themselves grounded in consciousness, in chit. Right. And then we'd have the it from bit from chit view,
yes.
which is a view I think that could be very much worth attention.
I'm going to go deeper into this in a moment. I'm going to ask you about the possibility of distinguishing mind from consciousness. This is an angle which is well known in Indian philosophy, not just in Advaita. And I think it might be a way forward, at least in the philosophy of mind. I don't know about the science of it. And also I'll ask you about the oneness of consciousness. But before that, let's get something out of the way. The really big, the elephant in the room, if you will, is materialism, reductionism. That right now, the materialist view of scientific view is dominant, that everything has to be grounded in matter or energy. You know, even biology is nothing but chemistry, chemistry is nothing but physics, and physics is ultimately in little bits of matter and or energy. And every week, every other week, you will have new articles, some scientific, some popular. Consciousness solved, the mystery of consciousness solved. They reduce it to something or the other. And they call it promissory materialism, that give us 30, 40 years, and we will explain consciousness to your satisfaction from the perspective of just brain or maybe quantum mechanics or something like that. What's your view of this and the prospects along this line?
Well, I think materialism is a beautiful and powerful view of reality. For a long time, I considered myself materialist. It seemed in many ways to be the natural view suggested by modern science, where so much gets explained in terms of physical processes, as you say, biology in terms of chemistry, chemistry in terms of physics. We have this picture of the physical world that it seems can explain so much. So it's a simple and scientifically powerful view. I ultimately just came to the view that unfortunately, materialism founders when it comes precisely to the problem of consciousness. Consciousness is something distinct that raises special issues. And materialism is great for solving what I call the easy problems of consciousness, potentially explaining aspects of objective human behavior. But when it comes to subjective experience, all of our paradigms for materialist explanations seem to fail. Maybe we can find correlations between what's in the brain and consciousness, but correlation is not explanation. And yeah, some people say, okay, this is just a temporary problem. We'll solve the problem eventually. And while I respect the humility in that view, I came to think, okay, no, the problem here is systematic. There are just certain limits on what you're going to get from purely physical explanations of reality, and they won't ultimately address the hard problem. So I ended up saying, okay, well, materialism, although very attractive, is false. The data, if you like, the data of consciousness force us to reject it. And that then can lead you to dualism. Maybe it can lead you to idealism and to other views. But my view is ultimately, taking the data of consciousness seriously requires rejecting materialism. Now, of course, that's controversial. And some materialists come back and say, what is this thing, consciousness? It doesn't even exist. Others try to be more ecumenical and say, yeah, well, consciousness does exist, but we can explain it. Or some will say, well, okay, we haven't explained it yet, but we eventually will explain it. And, I think we all should have some humility about what we're going. Maybe there'll be new, amazing, crazy ideas out there for a materialist solution to consciousness. But in the meantime, I've been, pursuing, I think there's a lot to be said for pursuing other views, even in light of contemporary science. Non-reductionism in science can be quite compatible, I think.
I agree with you entirely. Swami Vivekananda said, actually, he says, in a certain sense, I'm also a materialist. I think that there is only one reality at the end of it all, and I call it spirit, you call it matter. But until we come to that one reality, I think it's important to keep forcing the issue and take a stand on. Now, I want to introduce something which has not been discussed or at least highlighted in the present discussions in the philosophy of mind. That is the distinction between mind and consciousness. Note how we were talking just now, we distinguished between bit and consciousness. So for example, if you take the data of consciousness itself, Advaita Vedanta would say, notice how when we say it feels like something, what that something is, it keeps changing. So for example, the experience of a red rose is different from the experience of the taste of coffee. So the rose and the coffee are different, and the experiences are different. But notice one thing constant between them, that it still feels like. The something keeps changing, but the feels like. And the advantage of the split would be, in that case, mind would be the content of consciousness, and it would keep changing with every experience. And that would also explain why conscious experience, which is now a compound of the content and consciousness itself, it would also explain why conscious experience seems to correlate so closely with brain activity. According to Advaita, or most Indian, in fact, all Indian philosophies, mind is also a kind of matter. I mean, that's surprising to many people, but mind is the two kinds of matter: physical matter or gross matter, and subtle matter. Subtle matter is what we experience as objects in consciousness directly. In that case, the interaction between mind and brain would not be such a problem in principle, because both would be kinds of matter. And consciousness would be, in fact, in that case, something distinct. And the question people ask is, a reductionist would ask, show me one thing that this consciousness of yours does. And we could immediately say, it does, it gives everybody the feeling of, it feels like something. Yeah. So what's your take on this? Would you agree to, or what do you think of consciousness being independent of mind and giving rise to conscious experiences?
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think people use these words, mind and consciousness, in so many different ways. And some people say, well, there can be mind, mental states which are conscious, and others which are unconscious, and so on. But I think the distinction that you're focusing on here, yeah, people sometimes, I kind of think of consciousness as having two poles, if you like. There's the contents of consciousness, what you're aware of, and there's like what you might think of as awareness itself, the relation by which you become aware of these contents. Some people talk about the contents and the screen that the contents are displayed on, so on. Maybe that's another way of getting at the idea. But yeah, I think of it as